It is
anything else.
indeed. Why is the United States bombing Iran?
Well, it's good you asked that, because everyone talks about Iran, but I don't think anyone actually has an explanation or even tries to offer one. It's funny when you think about it. The reason they're bombing Iran is because the Iran war is part of a larger campaign. And I don't mean that figuratively or like in some metaphorical sense. No, it's physically part of a chain of blockades that the US have been working on. And, people don't connect these things, but I sat down and I finally understood it. For example, why is Trump talking about Greenland? What is the obsession with Greenland? Why Venezuela? All of these things, they're not by accident or random. So Iran is the final link, or at least for now, it's the final link in a chain of blockades that begins in Greenland, in the Arctic. Geographically, it's called the GI-UK gap. So this is the Greenland, Iceland, UK corridor. You can literally draw a line, a straight line. And that's where the first blockade is. And that began in January, February. And then at the same time that the US began the blockade in Venezuela and took Maduro, and then Iran. So all these events started at the exact same time, these campaigns. So it's Operation Arctic Sentry. That's a joint US, EU, COM, and NATO operation in the Arctic. Operation Southern Spear, that's the Venezuela one. And Operation Epic Fury in Iran. They're all linked. It's one giant blockade. And the goal of this blockade is multifold. So the first is to stop China's oil suppliers and gas suppliers from being able to deliver oil to China. And the US have largely succeeded at that. And I have the evidence. I published a documentary, but I'm going to publish a written version of it tonight or tomorrow. They've succeeded in this. So that's the first goal, is to cripple China's oil and gas supply. The other goal is for the United States to profit off of all of this chaos, because people think we're still in the 1970s, where if you close Hormuz or there's some kind of oil shortage, that this is bad for America. It's not. It's very, very good, actually. Higher oil prices and gas prices. The US right now, this is the most profitable period in history for US energy giants, in history. Their profits are at record highs and their share valuations are record highs. So that's the second goal.
But for the average consumer, the average Joe Sixpack who voted for Donald Trump, he's furious when he fills up his car or his pickup truck.
Of course. Yeah, like I'm talking about Wall Street, right? Like these people obviously have no consideration or care for anyone who's in a different, socioeconomic class. It's all about their profits. Like, make no mistake, I'm not saying it's good for the American worker. It's actually very bad. But for Wall Street, it's very good. That's the second goal, is the profits. And the third goal is the replacement of Nord Stream. So this has been happening quietly in the background. The US, in the last 4 months, have carried out 4 Chevron deals, and they've constructed a pipeline that is almost like literally symmetrical to Nord Stream. So not from the Baltic, but coming out of the Mediterranean. So this is also why Trump did the Gaza ceasefire right before attacking Iran and Venezuela, because they needed the ceasefire to start the board of peace and then they do the Chevron deal. So they did a deal with Israel for $35 billion in December. And then they did one with Syria and Greece in February, and then with Cyprus just this month in April. And that provides the gas from Gaza and Syria, and then the gas from the Aphrodite field in Cyprus, and then the infrastructure, the plumbing to move that into Europe. And so you might be asking yourself, well, how is that connected to the Iran war? Well, first of all, Qatar, you have to understand, when their gas field got blown up, this crippled their ability to supply gas for years. It's not something that was temporary or was going to be shut down for a little bit. This is crippling them for years. And they supplied 20% of the world's LNG. So the United States, you could say indirectly or even just by pure coincidence, they're profiting massively off of the destruction they caused in this region, both to Iran and to Qatar, to build this replacement to Nord Stream and kind of wrap up that project and make sure that they're now the only suppliers of both LNG and piped gas. So it's kind of a multi-staged plan.
Are you suggesting that the United States attacked Iran to induce it to destroy the LNG and oil producing of the Gulf states?
Well, let me put it this way. I don't know if they did the whole war just for that. I don't think it was just for that specific strike. But when that happened, they've been hitting Iran for 3 weeks around the clock. And right. The US were the ones running the tempo of this war. And going up the escalation ladder. So by the time they struck the South Pass gas field, which is really the same field, so actually you're causing destruction to this area anyway. But by the time they struck that on March 18th, Iran had said on television, like a week before, on March 12th, that if you hit any of our oil or gas infrastructure, anything that is co-owned by American corporations, meaning ExxonMobil in the Qatari field, we will destroy. So Iran had made this very clear explicitly. The US also have intelligence. They're not stupid. And they have teams of people whose job it is to sit down and calculate what happens.
Isn't this war in Iran Israel's war? Isn't the United States so subject to the Zionist influence?
Yeah, it is. But honestly, if anything, this war has really settled the fact that it's the US running Israel. And you don't have to take just my word for it. You can go look at what Khamenei himself, who was just assassinated by Israel in the US, he always maintained the line that it's the United States that controls Israel. Israel's a proxy. Nasrallah, who was also killed by Israel in the United States, last year during the war, he also said the exact same thing. This is a consistent position that the people in this region, the ones at the front line fighting Israel, have always said. Whether they're Iranian, whether they're Arab, whether they're Muslim, they're Christian. Throughout the entire history of the resistance in the region against Israel, all the leaders have said it's actually the U.S. running this proxy.
What will happen? What do you think will happen, Richard, if the United States enters into a peace agreement with Iran? Will Netanyahu wreck the agreement? Will he continue his own war against Iran? He'll be out of office if he can't produce some material event that he promised as a result of the war. He's not going to get regime change. He's probably not going to get the nuclear enriched material destroyed. He's certainly not going to get the ballistic missiles destroyed, and he's probably not going to get the Strait of Hormuz opened.
No. I mean, it's funny you mentioned the nuclear issue, because I've been covering that like here in Vienna like for 5 years now. I know it backwards, and it's one of the topics that the media lie about the most. It's infuriating because I'm there, I'm covering the exact same thing, and then I go and see what they're saying, and it's just complete lies. But yeah, the enrichment, so the stockpiles of enriched uranium. Honestly, let me just be very clear. Iran don't have a nuclear weapons program. I'm sure you and your viewers know.
Oh, yes, we all know that. Yeah. I think the president even knows it. He's just mouthing something that somebody whispered into his ear.
Yeah. They have a nuclear program, like a civilian one, and yes, technically you need that for a weapons program. But if they had started a weapons program, we'd all know. You can't hide this nowadays.
Correct.
So yeah, they're not going to get their hands on that enriched those stockpiles of enriched uranium, in my opinion. But let me put it this way: Netanyahu is definitely at risk of going to prison and being maligned inside of Israel if he stops these wars. That's absolutely
correct.
True.
And he has promised the Israeli public the greater Israel, to expand it from the Mediterranean to the Euphrates.
Yeah, I'm very happy you mentioned that, because I used to talk about this a couple of years ago, and it was still kind of like, my point is I'm happy it's something that's talked about a lot now. Yeah, and it's not just Netanyahu. If you go back and read, the letters from Ben Gurion, who's considered a lefty, and he founded Israel. He was telling his own son, and this was like a matter of policy for Zionists since before they even had an Israel, that they want to take the whole region. They're going to use whatever nation they get at the UN as a trampoline or as a jumping pad in order to expand and grab more land. So, like, he almost said that verbatim in a letter to his son. There's no doubt about this.
Well, they're doing it as we speak. They're murdering Lebanese. They're looting their homes. They're killing settlers in the West Bank whose families have lived there for thousands of years, and they're continuing to slaughter innocents in Gaza because they want the greater Israel. They want to be the United States of America of the Middle East. Agreed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this ideology is not a fringe thing that just a few people in Israel hold as an opinion. It's really a general consensus among Israelis that, we're not stopping at the current borders, like 1967 borders. What are you talking about? We're
Right.
going to take Lebanon. We're going to take Syria. As a matter of fact, they took Syria. It's bewildering that people still deny this. It's not even something that you have to try, hard to prove. It's all on paper. It's all on record, on video.
Well, even though you sound like you were born in London, you were born in Syria. You understand what happened there.
Yeah, my father is English, and my mother is Syrian Christian. So I have a very unique perspective of the planet and of East and West. And what happened in Syria, the whole coverage of that, and this was very simply put a war by Israel and the US to destroy the last Arab government in the region that was still supporting the Palestinians, right? Because the Iranians also support them, but they're not Arabs. So you had the last two state actors, Iran and Syria. So they've gotten rid of Syria, and Syria cleared the path. I mean that quite literally, to attack Iran. Right now, when they bomb Iran, they're using Syria's airspace. Right. We weren't exaggerating when we said that this is on the menu. Iran are on the chopping block next. Not to mention the fact that they betrayed the Palestinian cause, this new Jolani government, if we can call it that. And they've handed the infrastructure in Syria, right? The gas, I was just talking about the gas deals. Literally last month, they're handing it to Chevron, and they're handing the ports and the electricity and the entire grid to the countries that helped destroy Syria. So it looks very shady just from, just zooming out. But what does Israel get out of this? Israel get Mount Hermon. This is the highest peak, the highest point in the region. They can literally see all across the Levant from that point in the Golan Heights. It's really the most strategic geographical area in the entire region, in Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Israel. It lets you see. If you it's 2,000 meters altitude, it lets you see across the entire region, and the Israelis use it also for their signals intelligence to spy on the Bekaa Valley. So they're using it right now in this war to attack Lebanon and to gather intelligence. It's not some hypothetical.
How do you? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and I just want to underscore the fact that they've stolen 30% of Syria's water supply. It's not just about gas and oil. Since this new government took over after Assad, 30% of Syria's water is gone. So these are real losses that are being incurred on the native population that people don't talk about or don't realize, but they affect people's everyday standard of living. And they ensure that basically in the long term you're never going to develop properly. You're never going to be able to build yourself up into a self-sufficient country. And that's the saddest thing. Syria was self-sufficient in electricity, in pharmaceuticals, in wheat, in gas, oil, and now all of that is destroyed and gone.
How do you see the Israeli/US war against Iran ending? I mean, right now Trump is panicking because his poll numbers are slipping. It looks like the Democrats will take control of Congress in November, which will drive him crazy the last 2 years of his presidency, and he has nothing to show for his war.
Yeah, so I think it's helpful to separate the U.S. power into Washington and Wall Street, because they don't have the same objectives. For Wall Street, frankly, they not only don't care about American workers or the average Joe, they also really don't care who's sitting in the White House. I know that sounds very obvious, but it's very true. So my point is, for them, if the Democrats are in power or someone else takes power, as long as they play ball and they do what they're told, they're fine with that. And for Wall Street, their objectives are being met so far. Like I've covered the humiliation that Iran have inflicted on the US more than most people. Like I've done it in clinical detail, but the US losing militarily and economically, they're not the same thing. They're not losing economically. The dollar is stronger now than ever before, which I can't believe I'm saying, but it's true. And for now, they're attacking it's not just about them building a replacement to Nord Stream and the price of gas going up and the price of oil going up and that benefiting Wall Street. It's also the fact that they've been attacking Russian energy infrastructure, hundreds of attacks. I mean, when I started this investigation, they were just hitting tankers at that point, but they were doing it globally for the first time. They were hitting Russian tankers in the Mediterranean, in the Arctic, like literally all over the globe.
What do they do? with these acts of piracy on the high seas? What do they do with the tankers? Where do they go?
So just to finish that thought with the Russian attacks on Russia, it's no longer just tankers now. They're hitting the export hubs and they're hitting the refineries directly. So this month alone, April, has been the worst, the most intense in terms of attacks. And they say it's Ukraine, but it's obviously NATO and the US. It's impossible for it to be Ukraine alone. Now, the tankers, they literally pirate them. I use that word on purpose because they board these ships and they steal the cargo and either sell it off or they use it. So that oil is being literally stolen, right? Like taken off the ships back to the United States, and then through the Treasury and the Justice Department, they claim that this was either sanctioned oil, so they'll cite U.S. laws to justify the theft or the sale of those goods, or they'll just straight up use them and put them in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So it's really piracy, like literally piracy. You're stealing someone's cargo on the high seas and then selling it for money or using it yourself. And the reason I say pirate as well now, the transition from an empire to a pirate state, is because half the time they're not even stealing it anymore. It's literally they're just blowing up the cargo, especially when it comes to the Russian tankers, which is extraordinary. And this extends to LNG ships as well, not just oil tankers. So there's one that's been floating around the Mediterranean, a Russian LNG ship for like 2-3 weeks now, or a month, I think, that no one wants to clear up. And it's just extraordinary what they're doing.
I have to go, but I want to end